All right, good morning everyone. I'm just going to take you through our first lesson on using Adobe Illustrator. So I'm on the interface right now, and many of you, you'll have your toolbar on the left-hand side here. Some of you, it may be expanded or collapsed. Usually it shows up linear all the way down the side of the page. We're going to go ahead and start with a new assignment, and for this one we're going to call it pizza underscore, and then you're going to put your last name. And if you want, you can also put DA and then the class that you're in. So this first example is going to be for my Digital Arts 10 class. When you go through the profiles, there are several different profiles to go through. There are going to be some of our projects that we're going to be making where you're going to be designing them, and you may wish to put them into print. So we're going to set it up as a print document. Letter is your standard format. That's your standard size of paper. So we're going to keep it with letter, and we can go ahead and say OK. All right, so you have your regular sheet of paper here, letter size format, and we can go ahead and get started. The main tools that we're going to work on today are working with the selection tool, the direct selection tool. Then we're going to be working a lot with shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're just going to pick a shape here. When you select the rectangle tool, if you go ahead to see that little triangle in the bottom left corner or the bottom right corner, that indicates that there's more icons that are available underneath the top icon. So if you go ahead and click on it, it will give you the other options that are there. So I'm going to go down to the ellipse tool and come over here, and we can start using the elliptical tool. So when I'm working with the ellipse, you can see that it distorts, and I can make it whatever size I want. If you press the shift key down, then that gives you a nice consistent circle, and it's going to keep everything together. So we're going to start with making the crust for the pizza. So I'm going to make it a certain size. Once I have the size, I can move it to the part of the page that I wish to have it. And you can see that there are nodes that show up in the corners. So those are all set up so you can use them to resize your circle. And again, if I don't have the shift key pressed, it's going to distort it. As soon as you press the shift key, then it will go back to a symmetrical circle. If you want to flatten it, you can use the latitude, or the horizontal and the vertical nodes. And you can see if you just go above it, you can also turn your item. So if we're working with a perfectly symmetrical circle, you're not going to notice that. So what's the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool? Well, if you go to the direct selection tool, then you're going to see that the lines change. And now instead of having the points that we can use, the reference points for changing the size, okay, we have these other points, okay, and they're going to act differently. So once we go to the direct selection tool, you'll see that you'll have your nodes, and if you select a certain node, okay, then you can work with that specific node. You can't see it really closely right now, but if we zoom in, you can see that the nodes are actually showing differently. This one is a clear square, and this one here is a solid square. Once you have it, when you pull on it, then that specific node will be the only one that actually does anything. So now you're just working with that specific part of the object instead of the entire object. Now I've made that change. You'll see these Bezier handles that come off to the side. We'll work with those later. Don't worry too much about those or disregard them. We'll work with those later. Okay, but we are going to work with anchors because you want to change the shapes, because eventually on your pizza you're going to be putting on all of your different fixings. When we're working with the shapes, you're going to be working with, so you're going to be using these two different selection tools off and on, depending on what you want to do with your shapes. Now, I've taken my pizza and I've made it an irregular shape, and I don't really want that. So if I wanted to change it, I could go up to Edit, Undo, Move, but you can see the shortcut key here is Control Z. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the object and press Control Z, and I can change it back until I have it where I want it. Okay. So I'm back to my original piece of pizza. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create, we have the crust, now we're going to create the section for the cheese. So I'm just going to long hold on top of the icon, get the elliptical the ellipse again. And this time I'm going to use the center as a reference point. Now if I use the center, okay, and I pull away, if I use the shift key, it'll use that reference and pull away from the reference from the side. Okay, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go Control Z, and then I'm going to click the shift key and the alt key. Now this is kind of cool, because if you go to the middle, then it's going to use that as a reference point, and I can get another circle inside my circle that are the exact same. So now I have my second layer, which is going to be created on top of my first layer. So now I have my crust and my cheese. The other nice thing about Illustrator is as you're working, it automatically makes all the different shapes independent of each other. So I can move the bottom shape and it will move independently from the top shape. So it kind of creates the layers automatically. And say I wanted to take this shape now and I want to put color on it, then I'm going to go down to the bottom here. Here's our color palette. Now if you look at the top part of the color palette, that is your fill. That's going to fill the entire circle. So if I click on that and I want to change that to a nice cheesy color, okay, then, oops, sorry, I'm going to get that color and I'm going to move it. Okay, so I have the inside done. The other color here, the color on the bottom, that is your outline color. So if we were to rotate those, it would just rotate the two colors. If I want to change my outline and make it like a yellow, then I could go ahead and do a yellow. So if we go ahead and zoom in on that, you can see that my outside is a yellow color instead of black. Alright, so we have our two layers, and now we can start working with shapes for the different fixins that are going to go onto our pizza. Before I do that, I would like to show you over on the right hand side, we talk about layers all the time, and over here you can see that we have layers, but they are created automatically in Illustrator. So we have our first layer, and you can see inside we have the crust, which is on the outside. So if I was to go over here and click on the outside crust, let's give it a color. So I'm going to move it down, and it's going to be, well, we're going to make it fairly yellow so you can see it. I'll make it a bit more yellow. Click OK. So there's the outside of our pizza. So you can see the two layers here, and you have one over top of the other. You can change the layers, so you can change which one's on top and which one's on the bottom. If you didn't want to see a layer, you want to hide it so you couldn't see it, you can hide it. And then the other thing that's going to be really important as we go along is that you actually name all your layers. So this is the cheese on our pizza, so I'm going to name it cheese. This is the crust. So when you're going through, I'd like every single layer named properly. So when we start working with more complex shapes and when you have a lot more layers, it will be easy to find and reference the layer that you'd like to work on. Okay, I think I can leave you there and you guys can start to explore. Remember, once you get started, to hold down on the shape tool, and then you can click and get your other shapes, and that should be enough to get you started on your first project. Good luck.